Hey, welcome to Gen Next Door Podcast. I'm Jennifer, and I interview local business owners, entrepreneurs, and creatives. On this podcast, we talk about their business journey and how they are making a difference every day. You'll be inspired and motivated to take action with your business endeavors and connect with the community. Thanks for listening. So let's do this. Hi, welcome. On today's episode, I am talking with Ray Browning, co-founder of Biomotum. Ray and Zach have created a robotics exoskeleton system that helps anyone suffering from mobility issues. Biomotum is a life-changing technology for many people, so I'm very excited to speak with you today.
Good. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting us.
This is a very exciting product that I think it's very interesting and a lot of people should be more aware of it. So to start off, can you summarize what you do at Biomotum?
Yeah, we make wearable robots that help people to walk. And so for individuals who they're able to walk, but it's difficult, and it could be because they have a chronic condition like maybe cerebral palsy, or they are recovering from a stroke, or maybe they've gotten older and just walking is more difficult. We feel like that using a light, easy to use wearable robot, and ours right now, the device we're working on is at the ankle joint, can be really useful. It can really both help people to get around. So, things, and particular things like stairs and ramps and other things that we encounter normally in daily life can be really hard for individuals for which walking is difficult already. The second thing I think that we're really excited about is you can use something like this to actually improve your walking over time without the device. So it's like a therapy device, if you think about that. So it allows you to gain functional strength from pretty much anywhere.
That's amazing. So first, we'll talk about that in a little bit, but can you tell me about yourself, where you grew up? How did you grow up?
Mostly outdoors. I grew up in a household that you weren't really allowed to be inside the house in terms of, except for food and sleeping. So I'm mostly Coloradan, grew up in the mountains of Colorado, have had how would I describe it? A lot of different professional experiences over my lifetime, from engineer, professional athlete. I worked in the television industry for a while. I've been a university professor, worked in advanced innovation at Nike, have been involved in multiple startup companies. So,
whoa, you lived so many lives.
Yes. So there are some people who are delightfully happy and satisfied doing one thing, and I love people like that. I am not one of them. And my training is mostly in, I would say, biomedical engineering, musculoskeletal mechanics, kind of how we move through our environment, which I always had a fascination with.
I don't even know where to begin, to be honest. So I read that you were a triathlete and you won 7 Ironman titles. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Yeah. That's so interesting.
Yes. So the story goes that I was an engineer by training, mechanical engineer, and I went to school in Colorado and got a job in 1983. So probably before you were floating around on the planet, but it was for a sporting goods company because I thought, I wanted to be involved in sports in some way, and ended up in a baseball factory in Haiti, which was a whole nother interesting life experience. But it didn't seem right. So I wanted to, and at the time I was really into riding a bicycle. And I decided, I wonder if I could combine my interest in engineering with my interest in cycling and do something, that combines those two. So I applied to and got into graduate school at UCLA in 1985 because they were doing work on cycling and biomechanics and physiology, which was fabulous. But when I was there, I got introduced to these people doing this weird sport of triathlon, and I was like, "What is that? That is like crazy. Why would you do 3 things when you can just?"
And wasn't it started in like 1974 or something? So
something like
new.
That, late 70s. So this was right at the early stages. I mean, the Ironman races were not. They are nothing like they were. I think there were only 6 or 7 across the world, that you could go to in a year. Now seems like there's Ironman races all over the place, but turns out that several of my colleagues who became very close friends were involved in this sport, and I had grown up as a swimmer. And so I thought, well, why not? Kind of did it on a lark. Went with a friend to a race in New York, and because I had a free plane ticket for some reason. I was a poor, starving college student. I had no money. So I showed up and ended up qualifying for the Ironman at that race, because I was a decent bike rider. So, I could usually make up I just would get far enough ahead that I didn't get passed by very many people at the end. That was sort of the idea. And then I went to the Ironman in Hawaii in 1986 and did well there, and decided that was, I didn't really ever decide to become a professional athlete at that time. That's not how it worked. What happened was, if you did well in races, people would come and say, "Would you want sponsorship?" And you'd win prize money. And so you kind of, I don't know, people make a conscious decision now to be involved as a professional in sport, but triathlon in that era, you kind of just were in the right place at the right time, and you ended up.
Yeah. So it wasn't your passion, like your career aspirations. No, I wasn't. It was like for fun.
Yeah. And which was great. I strongly encourage people to have at least
it's like less pressure for you.
It was less pressure, a different kind of pressure. You're paid to, you're paid to do well in races. So you have that pressure, but also you get to traveled all over the world and got to see cool places and had wonderful friends that I still have to this day. So, and it's related to Biomotum from the perspective of, I learned a lot about human mobility and movement, but I also learned that, and I learned this through my own direct experience, but also interactions with many other people, that human movement is oftentimes the way that we kind of explore our overall potential in life, right? And the way it manifests itself oftentimes is, I didn't know I could do that, right? And when you make that statement, and whether it doesn't really matter what it opens you up to that question in lots of other areas of your life, right? Like, athletically, I didn't know I could do that. Wow, that's really cool. I wonder what else I could try. Not necessarily just athletically, but in a relationship or at work or other things. And so we started Biomotum to deliver that possibility to people who maybe are struggling with that, where movement is difficult. And by making it less difficult, there's the possibility that things that they didn't think that they could do, they'll start thinking that, oh, I could do that. And giving somebody that gift, right, to me is what we're trying to do, is just make that possible.
That's amazing. Because then you think, if I push myself and do this and accomplish something physical, what else can I do? And what else is possible? Anything's possible.
I'm going to go to medical school, or I'm going to, make this amazing product, or I'm going to be an innovator. So yeah, for me, it's been a theme for, going on how old I am, 4 or 5 decades of I've had a love affair with bicycles since I was 4. And that's the best way to describe it. I love riding a bicycle, and I always have loved riding a bicycle, and I'm 61. So that's 55 years of,
wow.
And it doesn't go away. It doesn't go away. I got on my bike yesterday, ride to work, and I was like, I just love riding a bike. It's so nice.
That's awesome.
Pouring rain and whatever.
I haven't rode a bike since middle school.
Oh, you should get back on. They're so fun.
I know. I just got my bike stolen after I just got it, and then it kind of triggered me.
Yeah, that's a bummer. I'm sorry.
So how else did Ironman and these races help you in business-wise? Did you learn anything?
Yeah, resilience. And suffering, the ability to be uncomfortable for long periods of time and uncertain about how things will turn out. And the ability to there will be times when you feel like the only thing you want to do is stop. And you just learn this is temporary. I'm not going to feel this way, at some point in the future. And so I'm not going to focus on it. I'm going to just get through it. It's uncomfortable. And every small business that you're starting has a lot of that. There's a lot of uncertainty. And so you have to have the ability to kind of weather that. And I think Ironman racing is a microcosm of that. Because in every endurance athletics in general, there's always a time where you say, I would rather stop.
Yeah.
Whether you're running, it doesn't really matter what it is. Like, I just would like to stop right now. Your body is like tired, and you're like, well, I guess I can't really stop.
So you did mechanical engineering, kinesiology,
Kinesiology, yep. Study of human movement, yeah.
integrative physiology,
Mm-hmm.
and a professor at Colorado State. Can you tell me a little bit about
Yes.
that? Like, why so much studying?
I
Or how do you think that all of that connects? Like, why did you decide to keep doing what you were doing?
I think part of it was, so when I was an undergraduate at Colorado State University, which ironically ended up being the place that I ended up being a faculty member. So that was a
Yeah,
funny kind of
interesting.
reconnection. I remember a professor, Mike Histand, who was a mechanical engineering professor. And I was a, sort of hyperactive undergraduate, but was a reasonably talented student, got in a lot of trouble, but also, was academically productive. And he pulled me aside one day and he said, you have a lot of energy. You seem to like, I'm working on some projects that kind of combine medicine with engineering. Would you like to help in my lab? And I was like, yeah, sure. Why not? That sounds interesting. And some of the first projects we worked on were things like Doppler blood flow meters and other things. And I started to see this connection between engineering and people, right? We could understand a lot about people with this kind of engineering viewpoint, whether it's building diagnostic tools, or I did some work on orthopedic surgery outcomes. And so that created an appetite for wanting to know more about that and more about that. And I was always intrigued by the research part of it. Like, well, how do we know that? What has to happen? And of course, if you have that interest, graduate school and more school tends to be the way that you satiate that interest. It's like that was happening. And then I had also had this long racing experience where I felt like I wasn't necessarily giving back in the way that I wanted to. Racing is a pretty selfish pursuit in a lot of ways, and I have come from a family of teachers. And so, my interest was, well, I love learning. I like doing research and I love teaching. And have this, this experience. My mom was an amazing English teacher. She was my English teacher in high school because I went to a very small school.
Oh, wow.
And so, when you put all that together, you sort of end up in academia, and which I was fortunate enough to be able to do. Yeah. So that's how that all, which I loved it. It was super fun. I loved being a college professor. It was really a fun thing to do. Yeah.
I think that's when you met Zach, when you were.
Yes. I got a call one day from this guy, Zach Lerner. He's like, hey, it was kind of shy. I'm thinking about wanting to do a PhD and I'm looking around for places and love to learn a little bit more. And so we had, a conversation and follow-up conversations. And I said, see, I think you'd be a great fit for not only what you can bring. I mean, Zach is an immensely talented human being. I mean, and it was easy to recognize that his abilities as an engineer were really, really high. But he was also, I don't know, just a good guy. He was a climber, he loved being outside. We shared a lot of the same kind of passion for pursuit. He and I built a climbing wall in my garage in our house in Fort Collins. So yeah, that's how we got connected. He did his PhD with us in our laboratory in Fort Collins, which was a bit of a schizophrenic place. So we had all kinds of stuff going on. And students could sort of pick and choose, kind of the projects that they were going to focus their energy on.
So what inspired you to solve this particular issue? Were you guys working on a bunch of different things, or were you like, okay, this is our focus and we're going to do this?
No, it wasn't at the time. So I'm going to give the credit to the wearable robotics entirely to Zach. Like this is his baby for sure. What we were working on really is more sort of understanding how impairments, and it could have been, we did a lot of work with childhood obesity, for example, and physical activity. And, trying to understand, well, how can we prescribe physical activity in a way that doesn't result in damage to the musculoskeletal system? So we were really trying to understand how to promote mobility and activity in groups of people, children and adults, that were compromised in some way. And Zach took that. Of course, the next one of the things that you do with that is say, well, what about people that have a physical disability, right? He started working on some robotic solutions in our lab. I never forget, he made a muscle out of an air compressor, and it was this giant noise. He would fire it up and nobody could do anything else in the lab because it was so loud. And so I was delighted to see him. He went off after his PhD and did a postdoc at the National Institute of Health, and really, really dove into this idea of wearable robots and how they might be useful in terms of both rehab as well as mobility assistance. So, and then we paired up, I guess about 3 or 4 years ago, we got reconnected again because I had left academia to go work at Nike, and he had, kind of continued his academic journey.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I forgot about Nike. Can we talk a little bit about that and how you got involved there, and why did you leave? Because that sounds like a pretty nice job.
Yeah. Well, so I got there because, kind of keep in mind that all through, I had lots of relationships with people in human performance, in particular businesses, right? So companies that I had been sponsored by, and I had done a lot of product development work for companies over the years. So that's something else that I've always sort of been interested in, is whether it was, I worked on some of the earliest bicycles designed specifically for triathlon. We were really, so in our lab in Fort Collins, we had what are called industry-sponsored projects, right? So companies would come in and say, hey, I have this thing and I want to see if it does what I think it does, or would like your help. One of the companies happened to be Nike. We started some projects with Nike. And that led to an opportunity to go work for them in their advanced innovation. So they knew who we were, they knew the kind of work we could do. And they said, hey, we've got this job that's a sort of a leadership role in this lab. That was kind of how I ended up there, which I wasn't there very long. I was there about 3 years, and it was a wonderful experience. I did a lot of really cool things, which I'm grateful for, but I wasn't a great fit at Nike. I didn't fit well. So I was actually asked to leave the company. I was fired.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I think this might be the first public acknowledgement of that's kind of how that happened. But I've gotten more comfortable with admitting that, right? That there were, I think it was just not a great fit. I needed, I think, a different environment to thrive in. And I was just, I think, struggling to figure out how to be helpful and useful in Nike. And I think Nike was also feeling the same way. So, we kind of, they said, we're not going to do this anymore.
Well, that happens.
It does happen. And I will say, it is a very, it's a very humbling experience. But I think it's good to talk about it, because people think of a career and they look at somebody and they go, oh my gosh, it's just been this whole, everything has been wonderful. And that's not true. Yeah. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to, be escorted out of a building by security because you've, lost your job. I'm hearing about all these layoffs that are happening, and we laid off. I was responsible for letting people go at Nike through reductions in force or whatever. And it's horrible. It's a really hard thing to do. Nobody feels good. And
yeah, on either side, it's horrible.
Exactly. So I have a level of empathy for that. But that being said, I mean, it's a cool company. Many, many people thrive there. I needed something a little smaller.
Yeah. I think it just depends on your personality. It's not necessarily not everyone can just work for those big companies. They also need to have other places to work, like those little companies.
And I think it's really important. Yeah. For your listeners, I think, pay attention to that. It's really important. Where do you feel like, where do you feel like you fit in? What kinds, and be true to that, because Yes, there's a lot of benefits to working in a big, highly profitable company. You're paid well. There's inevitably, if it's not the right fit, it's not the right fit.
So let's go back to the product. How does it work and how is it created?
Yeah. So the I think the principle is relatively straightforward. So think about an
Mm-hmm.
ankle brace. So you have your ankle joint, and think about you have a brace that you're going to wear around your ankle, and that brace is connected to motors, and so that brace can actually now move when you walk. And in our case, the motors and the controllers and computer and battery are all carried on a little waist pack that you wear right around your
Okay.
waist. And depending on how you walk, the motor actually can help. It helps provide, for example, push your toes down, like when you're walking, or lift
Mm-hmm.
your feet up when your leg is swinging forward to take another step. And so maybe if listeners have ever ridden an e-bike, right? So an electric bike, you push and the motor kicks in, and the more you push, the more the motor kicks in. And that's a lot like how this works. So as you step and you push down, the more you push, the more the device helps. And so it's like an e-bike for your feet.
Okay. If you so you have a YouTube channel, they can check that out too, because
Yep.
there's some videos about it.
Yeah, there are. There's some people with different conditions, stroke and cerebral palsy and others
Mm-hmm.
that you can see. It's pretty cool. It's pretty fun to
Yeah,
watch.
I like it. So the first prototype, it was the RA2D, I think.
Yeah, rad. We called it the robotic ankle assist device, RAD squared. It was a terrible name.
How did that start? And like, how long did it take? And how much money did you guys have to have? And also, what advice would you give to someone if they're trying to start something like this? Is it expensive?
It is, yeah. So Zach had been working on this concept in a, kind of university lab for a few years before we connected to try to commercialize it, to try to take it out of a university lab and actually make it a product, which is still a work in progress. That's been about 3.5 years. And during that time, we have raised around $4 million or
Oh, wow.
so, and we'll need more. And developing hardware like this, as opposed to software, is quite expensive, and more so if you're trying to do it in a medical device. So because there's a
Okay.
lot of regulation that you have to address. You essentially are held to a relatively high standard of quality
Yeah.
when you're making a medical device, which makes perfect sense. It should be that way. So, and advice for other people to get started, I think the main advice would be make sure that you have a problem that somebody wants a solution to,
Hmm.
not that you have a product and then you're looking for the problem. And I built this thing and I think it would be good for, if you start with that, it's usually much more difficult, because what you really want to do is observe how people do things and then go, well, that looks hard or difficult or silly or inefficient or fill in the blank. And then I want to build something that takes that difficulty out of the way. And in our case, what we saw was in children with cerebral palsy, their mobility, their ability to move was actually declining over time. And many of them end up in wheelchairs as adults. And that when we talk to people, like, that was a problem. That was like, we don't really want that outcome. And people want to stay mobile, they want to stay upright. So I think ensure that you have a solution, and even more importantly, if you're trying to build a business, that there has to be somebody that will pay for it,
Yeah.
and that will pay the price that you think you can sell it for. So it sounds simple, but it's easy to drink your own Kool-Aid and think, oh, I've got this great thing and it's the best idea ever. And then, you spend all this time and effort to try to get it to market and nobody wants to buy it. And then you realize, well, it's not actually meeting a need.
Yeah. No, that's the first thing I learned in business school. We have to first figure out the problem. Like, what is a problem that people are trying to solve? And then ask around, do like research.
Customer
Because then if they
discovery. Yeah.
don't want that, then it might be a good product, but if no one's going to buy it, then it's useless and you just wasted
Agreed.
all that money.
Yep.
So you guys were doing that in NAU.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So Zach has been at NAU still there. So he's still, a faculty member there. He still has a very full research load. He's got a lot of great projects using the technology that we're trying to commercialize. And also, he's constantly developing new ideas, which is fantastic and not surprising.
And how does NAU help out? Do they give you guys like a place to work or money?
No, there's no giving in the in the university world. And I'm not saying that as a criticism. I mean, that's just kind of the way it works. The intellectual property is, if you're working for a university or a company, any concepts that you develop are the property of the university or the company. So the intellectual, your brain is not, it's not your ideas, it's the university's ideas. You have to.
So like the business side of it all, is it NAU has part of it then?
No, so we have a license from the university. So we have an exclusive worldwide license for the technology. So the company essentially pays. So as we become successly and we sell products, we pay the university a royalty based on how much we sell, and we reimburse them for patent expenses and other things. So it's a great. If the company is successful, the university does well, which is good. That's fine. That should be that way.
When you joined him, what is your responsibility? Like, how do you guys split up the work, and what kind of partnership is it?
Yeah, so we're a very small group of people, and so I sort of manage the overall operations. I do the fundraising, all of the business aspects. And, kind of overall lead the team. And Zach is increasingly more focused on the R&D side and the product side.
And did you guys get that in writing, or is this all just, let's do it? Because like when you're trying to do like a business with someone, it's important to have those responsibilities split up. And how much are you taking? How much am I taking? Because then there's arguments and
stuff. Yes. I think both Zach and I would describe trying to do this together as friends is difficult.
Yeah.
It just is. And I don't know that. And so, yes, we have job descriptions. We've agreed on division of responsibilities. I'd say that's been relatively smooth, but it's stressful. I mean, you don't always agree on the path forward, and inevitably somebody has to make a decision and the other person has to say, I'm going to be okay with that. Yeah. It doesn't work very well to have it be sort of seat of pants, like, oh, whatever, you do this kind of, and I'll do this. It's got to be a lot more structured than that.
How do you handle like if there's an argument or a disagreement? How do you handle it to not take it personally, or to come back and be like, oh, I apologize? Or
yeah, there you go. That's the better. That's probably the more realistic. You sound somewhat emotionally. Your EQ is good, Jen. I think it's more. Zach and I are very different in terms of how personalities. I'm much more extroverted and think and talk at the same time, and Zach is very quiet. And so we've kind of learned this dance, that he has to go away and think about things, and I tend to try to talk less so that we, kind of meet this middle ground. So, but I would say we're always learning, and we don't get it right sometimes, and we get frustrated, and we both can sense the frustration, and then we sort of stop and go, okay. I think
like any relationship, like with friends or romantic or family, it's just communication.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Let's go back to the funding part. How do you get money for this expensive project? I know you guys get grants. There's something called non-dilutive capital. What is that? And then how is like private funding also an option? Like what's necessary?
So yeah, we've been fortunate to be supported in part by the National Institute of Health. We have what's called a Small Business Innovative Research Grant, an SBIR grant. And that is a form of non-dilutive capital, which means that the government is essentially paying you to do a project. And in our case, it's research on the effectiveness of this device, but they're not taking an ownership stake. So it doesn't dilute your ownership. So Zach and I are still the primary owners, and the government isn't coming in and saying, all right, we want 50% of your company, we're going to own. So that's grants and non-dilutive are generally the same. They're awards to the company that don't require you to give up any ownership or equity. Dilutive capital is essentially how most people think of, it's angel investors, venture capitalists. And, we've raised money through those channels as well, because for a lot of reasons, you can't rely only on grants to build a successful business. And, that is probably 75% of what I do is fundraise, try to find people that they're interested in what the company is trying to do, both from an impact perspective as well as a business perspective. So I love it. An impact for us is easy, right? It's pretty.
No, you guys have it good.
Easy. Yeah, the business side is always a little trickier because, when you're in medical device and you're building hardware, people have to be somewhat patient. It's not like software where 3 years and, now you have, 1 million customers and you're essentially making substantial amounts of money. Hardware businesses are much harder to scale, in particular in medicine, because you've got a lot of regulatory burdens and things like that. So, yeah, so we've been successful in both. Could we be more successful? Would I like us to be more successful? Yes. We've been lean. We've had to be very capital efficient.
And how do you find those people that could help you out?
It's tons of networking. Oh my gosh, it's tons of networking. And it's always, I don't even want to begin to estimate how many times I've heard, no, we're not interested, but you have to have a very thick skin. Like it's hundreds and hundreds. But what you do is you say, totally get it. Is there anybody else in your network you think I should talk to? You know about our company now? And inevitably that leads you to another conversation, which leads you to another conversation. And you're just building this network. And then, like a relationship, I think one of the learnings that I've had is, you generally want to have this idea of you reach out to somebody, well, I'd like to have you give us some money because we have this cool idea and we're going to make you some money back. And they say no. And then my approach initially
I'd like to take you out on a date and
and then
say no.
And you say no, right? Yeah. But then you can walk away, right? Or you can say, well, I'm going to come back in a month and tell you, I'm going to ask you out again, right? And that works sometimes, right? Because sometimes life might be in a different spot and you might say, well, yeah, that's interesting. Sure. Why not? I'll go do something with you. So one of the things I've learned is that you have to circle back, even if people have said no. You just continue to circle back, not to assume it's one and done. If somebody says no once, it doesn't mean, they're going to ultimately say no. But that's been learning for me because I tend to be, whatever. If you're too silly, if you can't see the opportunity here, I don't want to talk to you anymore.
No, same. Actually,
a really bad idea.
I should really take that advice though, because if I email somebody and I want them to be on my podcast and they say no, I'm like, okay, forget you. Like,
yes,
it just kind of makes me mad, and I don't want to talk to them again.
Yeah, and they may say no for I mean, you don't never know the reasons, right? And it may just be that, well, I can't right now, or there's it's dangerous to assume it's a lack of interest on their part.
Yeah, that's what I think.
And when I'm, you're always learning, and I feel like I had to go through the exercise of saying, all right, well, wait a minute, so hold on. If somebody approaches me with an interesting business idea and they want me to give them money, I don't know that the first time I get the email, I'm going to just write a check. It doesn't happen that way. Right. And but then I'm like, well, but I'm sort of expecting that. Right. So I'm like, well, I wouldn't do that. So why would I expect somebody else to do it? And so that's been now, when I am cold communicating or even, if I'm reaching out to an investor, I generally do it 3 or 4 or 5 times before I say, I'm just going to assume that there's not interest here. That's totally fine. So, but one of the things I've learned is through CRM tools, custom relationship management tools, like HubSpot or Salesforce or others. It's clearly all of those tools, you can automate that process. Send this email on this day, send this email on this day, send this email on this day. And there's a reason for that because it actually works. so I'm gonna rely on some of these marketing companies, right? That it's relationship management, I mean, if you just
I
gotta
didn't think
stay in
about it
touch.
that way. And
Hmm.
also, if someone were to bother me that much, I would think, oh wow, they're very persistent. Like, what is this about? So then I like look more into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
Good learning there.
I'm gonna
So
do that.
yeah, it's good. Yeah, it might be an internship or a job or somebody you want to talk to,
Hmm.
I think what's been helpful to me is your response will be probably mostly the same, right? Depending on, it's independent of who it might be, like
Hmm.
your introduction to us, like, hey, I'd love to have you be on a podcast. What you're doing is cool. You change a few words in there, but then the second, you can also compose like, all right, well, what if I don't hear from them? What would I say? And then, okay, well, what if I don't hear from them again? And how many times do I want to do that? And what do I want to say each time? Well, you can think about that in one sitting, right? And sort of go, okay, well, I'm going
Yeah.
to draft those. And then, sending out another communication isn't, hey, didn't hear from you. I assume you're super busy, but I'm really cool and I'm fun to talk to.
Yeah.
Uh,
I've gotten a lot of ghosting. Maybe I should do that.
but yes, I think you want to also realize there's always going to be a lot of ghosting. I mean, that's just kind of the world we live in. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
we're all bombarded with information way more than we can take in.
Hmm.
And so on the networking side, I think you've got to build it, but also the most effective, people who already know you. Warm introductions, we call them, right? Initially, when I was doing this and raising money, I was always like, well, who else should I talk to? And that would be
Hmm.
it. They'd give me a name. Oh, talk to blah, 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 so and so. Now I never do that. I would say, who can you introduce me to?
So I should ask people that I've already interviewed if they know people.
Yes.
Because
And
usually
not
I'm
only
doing
that,
this all like cold emailing
yeah.
or networking with
So
people I
not
don't
only
even know.
that, Jen, do it. So don't just ask them who, like who's fascinating to you,
Yeah.
ask them who is fascinating to them that they could introduce you to. Because
Okay.
now all of a sudden, like if you said to me, Ray, I wanted to interview some other people in this
Hmm.
space, right? Rehabilitation robotics, for example. I can say, I could give you 10 names right now, right? And you'd be
Yeah.
cold calling them. But if I sent an email to, Elliot Roos at University of Michigan, who's a really interesting guy, by the way, I said, hey, Elliot, just had this great conversation with Jen, this podcaster. Love what she's doing. She's young, she's eager, she's talented. I think you'd have a fun conversation. The chances of him responding to that email
Like
are,
1,000%.
oh my God, it's, yeah,
Yeah.
because I mean, so I think you have to, what I've come to realize is it doesn't really take much of the other person's time. And
Hmm.
and in general, like if you ask me that, like who else, I would ask you, what I've learned to do is to say, send me a little blurb about what you do, and I'll include that in my email introduction. Hey, Elliot, I just had this really fun experience with Jen, insert Jen's blurb here that you've written for me, right?
Okay.
And then I would sign off. You guys should connect. I'll leave it to you, right? And then you're done. So my job is simple. You've made it really simple because you've given me that 2 sentence or 3 sentence reason why Elliot should reach out to you. And so make the process of connecting, ask for the connection, not just the name and the
Hmm.
introduction, but make it easy for me to do it.
You've pitched to a lot of people, and you have a pitch deck. What do you suggest people put on their pitch decks? What do you put on there? What do investors want to see? What information do they need to know?
I'll start by saying what they don't need to know. So oftentimes there's pitching means a lot of things to a lot of different things to people. So let's say that what we're talking about is you have 3 to 5 minutes in front of a virtual or live audience to tell people who don't know anything about your company with the hopes that they may at some point invest in it. So
Yep,
that's a
that's my
very,
definition.
okay. So in that case, don't dwell on your solution. Most people don't really care. Tell me a compelling problem in a form of a story. So and so has blah, 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 blah. This is a day in the life. This part, and everybody goes, "Oh, wow, that's right. Like I've had that problem." Right.
Yeah.
So connect me somehow to the problem that you're addressing, and then show me that you've thought about this as there's a value proposition that people are willing to pay for. Right. I mean, there's a customer somewhere that's out there that's
Hmm.
waiting for that. You don't have to be they'll ask you, you don't have to have it all figured out. But what you do have to have figured out is that I've identified a problem. I think I have a solution, and the solution is something that people will pay for. Those three things, like if you're pitching and you're using a deck, gosh, please keep it down to 15 words or less on a slide, right? The focus should be on you, not your slides, right? Not your deck. So that would be my general advice is technical founders in particular want to talk about their technology. And the reality of it is, sorry to say, most people don't care that much, at least the first time, And I learned something from, believe it or not, this person was an acting coach, but it was recent. And he said, last words matter. People are going to walk. Because that's
the last thing that you hear, and it's probably the most memorable.
And only what most people end a pitch is say, thank you. And so I end a pitch by saying, and I had to work on this, and this is how it goes. I want to leave you with this. All of us will experience difficulty walking, and we can either choose to be inactive and in poor health, or we can choose to thrive. And at Biomotum, we want to help you thrive.
That's good. That's really good.
That's the ending. Yeah, but I never would have.
Mic drop.
Right. And I never would have known that if this guy hadn't said, like, I went through my pitch and I was all excited, pumped up, like, oh, it's fantastic. And he was like, it's okay. And I'm like, what do you mean it's okay? It's great. He's like, no, it isn't. And he said, what was the last thing you said to me? I said, well, I said, thank you. He goes, you don't need to say thank you. Tell me something. I mean, leave me with something. I just, oh my gosh. And so, and you rarely hear that in a pitch, right? So that's my last words matter.
I'm going to take that too. And so do investors ask you questions afterwards, or is it just done?
Oh, no.
And what do they ask you?
Yeah, so generally the process is this, is if you're selected to pitch, which oftentimes that in and of itself can be extremely competitive, even getting in front of groups, then you pitch. You might pitch in front of a screening group. It's a small group of investors that is part of a larger group. So then they say, yes, we'll go into the main meeting. Then you pitch again. And then you go into the process of what's called due diligence. Okay, there's some interest here. And you get questions all over the map. Technical questions, financial questions, company organization questions, financial forecast questions, regulatory questions. And you just have to be, that's where people are looking to really understand, have you thought about this as a business and how this business will make money? The assumption generally is your idea and your thing, right? Whether it's a service or a product, is you're going to be able to pull that off. Right. That there aren't as many questions about, well, can you actually make this? Unless you're really, really, really early, like it's ideation stage, in which case you probably wouldn't be pitching anyway. You have to be ready for a wide variety of questions. And generally what you do is you establish what's called a data room, which has all kinds of documentation that you've created. This is our exit strategy. Here's all of our financial records. Here's the capitalization, or who owns what in the company. It's an open book. I mean, because it's scary. Giving you cash. Right. Yeah.
I've done it in class and I've done it in high school. It was so nerve-wracking.
Yeah, it can be.
I mean, I'm also horrible at public speaking, but anyways, has it ever stumped you with a question, or do you know the whole business inside and out?
No, there's never a time that I have not said at least once that I don't know the answer to that question. But but the reason I don't know the answer is one of two things. Either I've just not thought about it and I need to think about it and I will get back to you, or we're not in a stage where that question is relevant right now. Like somebody might say, how much do you think reimbursement will be for our device? And I'm like, that's a 5 year from now question, right? Or that's a 2 year from now question when we start talking to payers, like people who are going to pay for it. It's not really a relevant question right now. So haven't given it a lot of thought, but it would be, it's some ballpark number. So yeah, I do think one of the strengths of any speaker in this regard is the ability to say, I don't know, haven't thought about that. But if you haven't thought about it and it's an important question, then you need to follow up.
Can you walk me through a typical day for you? What do you do once you wake up and then go to sleep?
Jeez. So I'm usually up at around 5 to 5:30 in the morning.
That's early.
That's early. My wife gets up at that time and she goes to work. She's a physical therapist, so she leaves for work at about 5:45. I usually check in with the world. I kind of look at the New York Times. I orient myself. I look at my calendar. I might have a few things that I need to get done. Then I have a high school student that I have to get off to school, and I manage that. And then, like today, I'm working half the day from home and half the day from our offices. So, and then the day for me is it's generally probably 30% what I would call just keep the lights on activity, just general administrative management. Like, yesterday I spent a bunch of time trying to make sure that our retirement plan was compliant with federal regulations, because
the boring stuff.
Yeah. So, it's the stuff you have to do to keep the lights on, pay bills, or work with our accounting. Another third is active seeking out of investment opportunities. So it's either recontacting or contacting investors, building that network, continuing to have that conversation. And then another third of it is generally meetings with various members of the team to kind of assess where we are, plan strategy, evaluate, how's the product coming, things like that. I usually try to get some exercise. I'm usually on the hook middle of the week for making dinner. So I get done working at 6, make dinner, get a little exercise, usually go back to do more work between like 7:30 and 10, and then go to bed, start over again.
Okay. Does work ever affect your personal life, or do you have a good life-work balance? Or is it all just kind of like intertwined?
Yeah, that's probably the best way to describe it. I have a lot of freedom, so I can work kind of where I want and less. I mean, there's a lot of work to do. So I would think if you ask, like my kids, they would say I work a lot, but I'm getting better at balancing, right? So, I go to yoga, I ride my bike, I'm really actively trying to be more balanced. My son and I, who's 15, we have a Wednesday night dinner date, where we go out and hang out for an hour and just eat terrible food and, that. So it's given a lot of lip service, like, work-life balance is important, but it's actually like super, super important.
Is it important to like pencil in certain things in your personal life? Otherwise, you wouldn't do them. So you just have to put it on your calendar?
As much as I think we all want to admit that the things like date nights and hanging out with your kids and doing those things, they have to be in your calendar.
What motivates you?
I am motivated by helping. I think a lot of my motivation, and it's going to sound a little cliche, but I'll tell a story to illuminate kind of the motivation for me.
Okay.
And that I grew up with a father who he unfortunately died when he was 48. So he was young, but we would always, and I mean always, stop on the side of the road for anyone.
Oh my God.
They were on the road and Dad was driving. We were like, oh shit, here's a car on the shoulder. We are pulling over, and we would pull over. I grew up with this sense of serving others, right? As a core part of what was important to do as a citizen. And that's become a really important thing for me. It's very motivating to be involved in something that I think will help other people.
That's amazing.
It drives my kids crazy because I'm forever like stopping and asking if do you, and I get in the greatest conversations. I was in the airport in, I don't know, LA once, a couple of weeks ago, and this young woman was really struggling with like a heavy bag. And I was like, wow, can I help you? I helped to get it on a cart. And I asked her, like, you must be going somewhere for either you have really heavy clothing or you're going somewhere for a while. And then we got into this conversation around, she was off to Hawaii for, a year to work with this cool job. But yeah, seeking out opportunities to help others. And the second thing, and maybe this is a little bit less about what motivates me, I am competitive. I want to see us succeed. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
motivated by that for sure. But not if it's at the risk of not being nice.
That's a perfect balance, I think.
Yeah. You just
Yeah.
have to care for each other.
I love that. I feel like I should do a little bit more of that because I don't really like to talk to strangers. I am
Yep.
so jealous of my dad who like can talk to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And once you turn around, it's like, oh, he made a friend. And I wish I was a little bit more like that.
Yeah. Being a little out of your comfort zone is not a bad thing,
Yeah.
you know? And I'm much more like your dad. And I have had, I've also traveled all over the world. So I'm not, when I get in environments where I don't know anybody, I'm not uncomfortable. Like I'll strike up a conversation with anybody.
Yeah.
And I'm fascinated by what people do for work. Like, I'll be like, how does that actually work? Like, how do you do that? What's going on behind your screen? Like, can I see? Like an airline, I'll check in. Like, what do you see that I don't see? Because you're doing a lot of stuff. It looks like it's complicated. Can you share it
Yeah.
with me? And they'll be like, what? I think that curiosity is super important. People like to talk about what they do.
Yeah. They'd like to talk about themselves a lot. I do
Yeah.
ask the questions. It's the like pushing myself to get the conversation going. That's the
Yep.
hard part.
Yeah. Because there's people that will not respond, not go in there.
What do you like most about your business?
That it's impactful, that it's
Yeah, it
actually,
really is.
yeah, we have the unique opportunity to make something that is truly life changing. And that's,
Hmm.
gosh, how great is that?
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. I'm grateful
What's
for Zach for the opportunity.
thanks, Zach. What's the 5-year vision for your work?
So I'll say this for the company. I think the 5-year vision is, we are likely to be a target for acquisition from a larger medical device company, and that would be a pretty standard exit for us. It's like, okay, we've proven that there's a market here, there's a business, and then the Autobox, Medtronics, other big fish in the pond, would take an interest. I don't know that I will be at the helm for that long, because I feel like after 3 years, I'm getting close to the sunset of where I can be most valuable for the organization as the
Okay.
leader. Organizations need different kinds of leadership as they grow. And so, my hope would be that in the next year or so, we find the right person to sort of take it. Okay, we've gotten this early work done. This person can actually help grow what we started. So personally, for 5 years, I'm 61. I want to open a jazz bar
What?
somewhere. So, I've got some other vocations. I've still got some things I haven't done yet that I need to check off before.
Oh,
So,
you're so inspiring.
yeah, life is life.
Usually people get stuck at the same job because it's comfortable.
Mhm.
And I don't know how you see the world where it's like, oh, well, this company needs somebody else. This is like my time to go. Usually people want to like hold on to it for dear life.
That's true, especially if they've helped found it and they've put a lot of work in early
Yeah, it's like
on.
their baby.
But I look at it more like, if that's true and I really want it to succeed, I have to always be evaluating whether I'm the right person to make that happen. And I knew this. Zach and I talked about this at the very beginning. I said, look, I will be the initial catalyst. I'll help us get organized. I'll help tell the story. I'll help get some early money. You've got this great idea. We'll build something together, but I'm only the beginning person. I don't want to be a CEO of a medical device company. I have no interest in that. I just don't want to do that. There'll be some other interesting problem that I want to tackle, like providing people, good music. I've wanted to have a bike shop for a while, because I want this passion for cycling. So I think what I've learned maybe, and the reason that I'm more comfortable is I've done it so many times, and I always have understood that when you let yourself be open to opportunity shows up.
That's awesome.
And I call that providence. I don't know why it works, how it works. There's some way that when you sit down and say to yourself, okay, I think I want to do something different. All of a sudden your view looks different, right? And you start saying, well, that's kind of cool. Oh, I didn't ever notice that they're hiring that company. They do cool stuff. Or a friend from 15 years ago will reach out, or 10 years ago will reach out and say, and you'll be like, oh, well, you do this. Things happen.
Yeah.
I cannot explain it. But so I have confidence that the next thing will happen.
I love that positivity.
Now, I will say it can be very stressful.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to make it seem like it's, oh, everybody should be this way. It's a significant amount of envy for people who've stayed in the same thing and they've not had to, reinvent themselves and I admire that. And I have many very dear friends that I look and go, wow, that's been a great run. What they've been able to accomplish in one organization has been remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
But I've learned to trust that I have something to offer the world, I think, and I can usually figure out a way to make some contribution.
Well, when you have that jazz bar, you let me know because I want to go.
Yeah. Okay. For sure. I will.
What do you read or watch to stay informed or for fun?
Ooh, so I do like to stay informed. I generally use New York Times and related sort of publications to stay informed more broadly about world events. I have some other threads that I get that are a little bit more, business focused from Crunchbase or PitchBook or other kind of entrepreneurial sort of focused things, just to kind of keep a pulse on, what's generally happening in the entrepreneurial landscape. Yeah. And then I get a few medical device specific sort of newsletter communications that I read to kind of keep a pulse on, like Angel MD and some others that are I found have been helpful to kind of understand that, keeping myself up to date, both
That's good.
overall. On the other side, on reading, I've just gotten through a period where I've read quite a bit of good fiction, Out Stealing Horses. But now I'm reading Lean Startup. So I kind of vary back and forth, between things that I think are going to be kind of immediately applicable to. But lately, I've probably read 7 or 8 books in the last month that are more fiction. So I reread The Shipping News by Annie Proulx, which was a, Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, which I really enjoyed.
It's good to read, about your own business and industry, but then it's also fun to do like fiction sometimes and entertain yourself.
Yeah, I tend not to be so screen dominant. I don't do a lot of screen time outside of work, so I don't watch a lot of movies or things like that. I'd rather be outside or else.
That's good. I'm addicted to TikTok.
Okay, well that's your generation
idea.
For sure. Yeah, well that's my son is the same way. So,
what is something you want to leave the listeners with? Information about your projects, last inspirational words.
Do something that matters and be nice.
That's good.
That's what I'd like to leave listeners with.
I'm taking a lot of stuff from you.
If we can all sort of have those two things, is do something that matters and be nice. And then that do something that matters can be a little thing for somebody,
someone on the side of the road.
Yeah, at a 4-way stop, you let somebody go, or you just do something that matters, and then be nice. We need to be nice to each other. There's too much division. There's too much that's trying to kind of get in the way of inherent kindness. And, if there's listeners out there that are interested in learning more, come to, reach out to me, Ray at Biomotum.com. And I'd love to tell you more about what we're working on. Or if you happen to know people that are in the investment space, I'm also,
I'll leave all the stuff in the show notes.
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay, last question. What do you love about Arizona? What specific local business or location?
So big Flagstaff fan, obviously.
Yeah. It's a really nice place.
Yep. And I don't have a specific Flagstaff sort of, what's it called? City Diner, maybe? There's a breakfast place in Flagstaff that I love going to. I think it's City Diner. Yeah. But also the mountain biking there is epic. Yeah.
I bet. We have so much like cool nature stuff in Arizona.
I agree.
Like everything. Well, that was it. Thank you so much for speaking to me. And
of course,
please continue to do amazing things.
Yeah, same. You too. I'm really proud of you. And so stay in touch with me.
LinkedIn?
Yes, LinkedIn is great.
Yep. Hey guys, did you like my new little tune on the intro? I got my own song and I thought that it would be a perfect time for the 20th episode. It's pretty catchy. Anyways, I really enjoyed talking with Ray Browning from Biomotum on this episode. He has lived many lives, so there was just a lot of good information that I took from him, and I hope you did too. Again, Ray and Zach are creating something really life-changing for people. If you want to learn more or want to connect with Ray, check out the show notes for all that information. I also want to take a second to mention that my events page on my website is up and running. Yay! I'm collecting business events and artist markets around the valley, so you can check it out when you want to go out and explore or connect with the community. If you enjoy this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share with others, post on social media, leave a rating and review, or tell your neighbor. Thanks. I'll see you guys later.